Questions 3 and 4. I have skipped ahead a little bit, and I've already labeled this lower framework just to save a touch of time so you don't have to watch me just make text boxes. But here we go. In the second framework above, labeled the vertical axis unemployment and the horizontal axis time, we are using the same time frame in both models. So I've sort of done that. Next, draw a horizontal line and label it natural rate. That should be about 5%. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to horizontal line. Should be no big deal. Come on. I'll put it about halfway up this graph. And since this is going to be sort of our baseline, since it's the natural rate, I'll make it like shaded, like I did for our line of best fit up here. So what this tells us now, let me label it. I think I already made that to save some time. This tells us that there is a constant, or there would be a constant rate of unemployment if we only had, now think this through just as a way to review and prepare. What types of unemployment? Well, there's frictional unemployment. That's the normal comings and goings of people between jobs. And that's not such a bad thing, right? Because that allows people time for job search so that their human capital can be well matched with the right job. And so we get more output probably than we otherwise would if we had none of the frictional unemployment. Then we also have structural unemployment, which is kind of, well, structural. So it's long-term, it's kind of always present, and that's from people whose skills have become obsolete. But that isn't a very volatile thing, so it's a pretty steady thing. Both of those things I mentioned are pretty steady. We also have seasonal unemployment, which some textbooks don't even mention much about because it's easy to control for season. There's a cycle going on up here in the business cycle, but it is unpredictable. The seasons are predictable, so we can control for seasonal variations in unemployment. And so effectively, they too, the seasonal effect is something we can treat like a constant because it's constantly present, even though it's not constantly the same. And then we have deviations from our natural rate of unemployment by cyclical unemployment, which gets its name because of its relationship to the business cycle. So that's what we want to go for after I label this 5%. So I've created this text box, so what I'm going to do is just copy it again, move it over here, get rid of the text that's in it, and change that to 5%. And 5% is Miller's estimate of the natural rate of unemployment out there. And I am doing this again in Excel. You do not have to do this in Excel. You could do it by hand. But I figure if you can follow this going on in Excel, you could do it by hand and follow what you have there too. So now I need to, going back here to the bottom, then model the unemployment rate around that because we have deviations from the natural rate. Again, this is a theoretical framework, so the specific dates are not necessary. We're not going to label each year or anything like that and plot points. Refer to the top framework and think about how unemployment should be in relation to that. Now that's kind of a main event here. Tying these things together is a main event. Now I know I don't like what I've done here because this period of time in from 1990 to 1992, first of all, probably shouldn't even be that long. Okay. And then the recession that I mentioned of 1992 was a fairly minor event. The one problem I have is that I'm liking this a little bit better. So I'm just tweaking what I did a little bit because I've given this some more thought. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's just a theoretical kind of framework anyway. So I like that better. Yeah, I'm happier with that. So now I want to relate unemployment to what I've done here with RGDP. And to do that, I have to ask myself, when the economy between 1990 and 1992 is producing, let's say, above the long-run growth rate of the economy, the gray line, what does that mean about unemployment? what's unemployment like when we're producing at a higher level than our long run average? Unemployment should be pretty low at periods of time like that, shouldn't it? Those are good times. And unemployment is low during good times and high during generally economic bad times. So now I can start to think about how to draw my actual unemployment rate. It should be lower in 1990 than the natural rate of unemployment. But when would it be back at the natural rate? Wouldn't that be right about when the economy is right at its long-term growth rate? Since this is the baseline kind of level of unemployment, and this represents the long-run capacity of our economy to produce goods and services, shouldn't this line, the black line, cross the gray line at the same time as this black line crosses this gray line? I think it should. At the same time, and time is aligned this way, isn't it? So let me just nudge this over just a little bit and make that happen. I think that'll probably do right there. So I have, again, unemployment rose as things cooled off in this economy up here. It was right at its natural rate when the economy went into recession or went negative here or crossed over, and I have this is a very tight drawing because it was a minor recession. When it crossed over its natural or full level of output, we could say, its natural rate of output, its long run growth rate, we were right at full employment or our natural rate of unemployment. And then we were in recession. So what happens to unemployment during recessions? It goes up above the natural rate. And that's what's going on here from this green dot to the end of this segment. But that was a short-lived recession. So we hit the bottom of the recession where the slope here is 0, because recessions, the traditional definition of a recession was 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Well, that would be when the slope of this line is negative. So these are our recessions right here. And that's when unemployment should be high. But then we hit a what's it called at the bottom of the business cycle? We hit a trough. That's right there under this cursor. And so that means unemployment stops rising and levels off and maybe even falls. So now I can draw in that effect. And now we have unemployment. Now it's still going to be above the natural rate of unemployment for a while because we are below our long-run growth rate of our economy in here from 92 to 94 or something right like that. But the recovery is steep. We're approaching it pretty quickly, right? We're doing okay. We're closing that gap, getting back to our natural rate of unemployment, getting back to our natural rate of unemployment, but getting back to our full productive long-run growth rate of the economy. So this period of time, we're below our long-run growth rate, so unemployment is higher than the natural rate. But when this bottoms out, this peaks and starts to come down. And where does it get back below its the natural rate of unemployment? Well, probably right about when we get back to our full capacity of our economy, right there where the cursor is right now. That's where this probably should be aligned to cross the natural rate. About right under that. I can't draw this as nicely as I'd like to because, using pages here, that's what I have on my MacBook. I probably could have used an Adobe product, but I have a large learning curve and it wouldn't add a lot to your understanding anyway. I don't have the thing where I can put more than one dot on here. I don't think. Yeah, I don't think I have that such thing. No, I could add. I could add a fly. I don't think that would help very much. Now it just goes through those. So I only have the very basic of the basic lines. So I'm going to make that work. So now back to where I was. Now this was the boom of the 90s. This was when the economy got very hot in the late 90s, and then in 2001, boom, we slid into recession. That's what's going on there. The decline in output is the recession. That was a peak, 2001. The tech bubble burst. We went into recession. And again, this is just a loose sketch. The magnitude might not be all that accurate. So unemployment was very low until that happened. And then when it happened, well, unemployment began to rise again. So I'll add another segment. And it does take me a while to draw this, but it gives you a chance to think about what I'm saying, I hope. So now unemployment was below its natural rate during the booming late 90s, and we're below the natural rate of unemployment here. And then we go into recession. It begins to, unemployment begins to rise. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Unemployment begins to rise. Something like that. And we are at a place where unemployment is above its natural rate, right when we are at our long-term growth rate on this gray line. Now we're crossing over our natural rate of unemployment because unemployment is getting quite high since we're not making everything we could be making in this gap here. But we hit the trough. That's again where the recession has come to an end. The growth rate is back to zero right here. It's not falling anymore because the slope of this line is zero. It's flat. So we hit the trough and unemployment will stop rising and start falling again. So I can add another segment. Probably could just copy that. And unemployment indeed continued down till well, actually I can go like this with this segment. Continued down for quite a while. And what was happening was the housing boom. We had the economic recovery, but then we had the housing boom. And then of course we had the housing bust. And that was in December 2008 when that recession began. So here we are, again, comparing what's going on here. I'm just trying to make my lines somewhat decent. So we were below our natural rate of output. The economy was expanding. We got above our natural rate of output. So unemployment began coming down, coming down. We hit right at our natural rate and got below our natural rate by about 2007, late 2007. And then in late 2007, we had another recession because the housing bubble burst. And when that happened, well, what do you suppose happens to unemployment when we go into a recession? Unemployment rises. And so we began to rise again. And that might be a rather dramatic change there, but bear with me. Like I said, my lines don't do everything I might like them to. Probably something. It's probably pretty good. So, look what's going on here. We go into recession. We fall down below our natural rate. I probably could pull this down a little bit, actually. It was a deep recession. I mean, it was the Great Recession. And so unemployment rose quite sharply with the Great Recession. And look how low output is down here, well below our 2% growth rate Output fell significantly with the Great Recession, so unemployment rose significantly, got well above the natural rate. Actually, I don't want to go too far above the natural rate because I know what I want to do next. And then we hit a trough. And when we hit a trough, unemployment started to improve. Roughly at the same time, unemployment peaks as roughly at the same time we hit a trough. And I think you know the rest of the story. Then we began a very long recovery. This is the trough after the Great Recession. So this would be about 2009. And then we began the long recovery since then. And really, it probably would be a longer line, but I'm kind of out of space. And we don't know how we're doing right now just yet because this data that we would use to complete this is something we can see kind of in the rear view mirror. We don't know how things are until we're already past them. We do know unemployment has gone very high. We actually do know, so this probably corresponds to this. Can't have that like that. Here we go. So we know in February 2020, the economy went for output. That's a dotted line because that's kind of the present situation. And we also know this, if I could dot just this segment, I would, but I can't. We also know okay, I'm trying to be too much of a perfectionist here. That unemployment has skyrocketed. But we don't know how things are going to end. We don't know where that curve goes from here, do we? And these numbers are even being revised, so I have them as dotted lines. So that is the relationship between the unemployment rate around its natural rate and the output of the economy around its long-term growth rate. Use dotted lines to relate the models that you have sketched to one another. So what I want to do here, and I'm going to try to move kind of quickly because this video is taking a long time, and it's mostly because I have to point and click so much, is I'm going to just try to put dotted lines around the recessions. So let me make a dotted line. Now I know we're in recession when we are going negative in output, right? That's the definition of recession. And look, I align these pretty well, just eyeballing them. So there's my first dotted line. That's the beginning of the 1992 recession. And when the economy hit its trough and began recovering, that was the end of the 1992 recession. I don't have the means to do it, but if I could darken that in there, I would love to do that, but I'm not using a sophisticated enough software package to do that. See that's the decline in output, that's the recession. And look what's going on with unemployment. It's going up well above its natural rate, but when we get out of, when the recession hits its bottom, when we hit the trough, the unemployment rate hits its peak. And then we had the tech bubble burst, another recession. And so I'll go over here, and that recession began in December 2009. We hit a peak in the business cycle. Again, I'm repeating these terms to help reinforce them for study purposes, for exams, right? And that recession, like all recessions, came to an end. They never feel like they're going to end. They're always political, or maybe not political, maybe they are, commentators who are saying it's not going to end, but they do come to an end. And we hit a trough. The recession ends. What happens to unemployment? It peaks and begins to fall. And then we have an expansion. And then we have a peak. It's the same old pattern. That's why it's called a cycle, the business cycle. And that was the beginning of the Great Recession when the housing bubble burst. And they said, some people said it was going to last for decades and all that kind of thing. But recessions come to an end. We hit a trough in 2009. And when that happened, the unemployment rate, well, maybe I missed the mark a little bit, but the unemployment rate peaked and began falling, 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 and then we had one more time. Let's go ahead and the National Bureau of Economic Research Business Cycle Dating Committee, I don't think has said so. We did look at their page, but I can't remember right now. Then we have the present, where we will surely be, if we're not already declared in a recession. We have had a market drop in output, so I think it's safe enough to say that's there. So what have we done here? We finished number 4, first of all. But we've also done something that you probably never thought of before. Now when you're driving down the road and you're listening to your Sean Hannity or your NPR or whatever you're into, and they're talking about the state of the world, and they're saying things like the recession's never going to end or the expansion's never going to end, and all these things that you might hear. Now you have the tools to pull over. Please do it pulled over, and don't try to do it when you're driving. And take out a napkin and a pen and really model these things through on a napkin, or as they call it, a back of envelope diagram for yourself, and really think these things through. Somehow I lost my label over here. This used to say unemployment, but it disappeared. Sorry about that. But you could do this on a napkin, and you don't have to be perfect to see the relationship between unemployment and the output of the economy. If we wanted to be perfect, we could find those data points. We could put them in Excel or in software, and we could plot points. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to reinforce the relationship between all these variables and to review the terminology and the concepts to help you do well on the exam. So now before I stop recording, I will just let you know that I did peek ahead and got some real data. Now this is output of the economy way back to like 47 or so. We don't need to go that far. We started in 1990. And in 1990, look at that. If you imagine a line of best fit through this output of this economy, it would be, it would be high. The economy, output of the economy was above its natural rate there. And that was in the housing boom. It was slightly above its natural rate in the late 1990s. I think I got that pretty well. These gray bars that I would have liked to have filled in are the recessions I talked about, except if you notice the current thing, they've even done it in a different color, it looks like over here, because it's not official yet. We are on the way to a recovery. We are in an expansion right here, this last little segment. We just don't know quite what that's going to mean because this data is big data and we don't know the future. We had the small recession in 1990. We had a slightly larger recession here in 2001, and then we had the Great Recession here in just the time period as I remembered it and described to you. And so we modeled this. We didn't do it perfectly. This is done with data. We did it, we did it okay. And then if you think about what this means for output, I'm sorry, that was output. With the unemployment rate, look at this. 1990, unemployment shoots up with the recession of 1992. And then it peaks shortly after, and unemployment falls. Now 5% would just be, here's 3, so 5% would be right about here, the natural rate of unemployment. So it'd be cutting right through these dips right here, just about like we sketched. Now we might not have gotten much below the, we were maybe not much below the natural rate of unemployment in 1990. I was only young then. I don't remember it very well, but we were probably below 5% right here, but not much. And then it shot up with the recession, and then unemployment fell, and we got below the natural rate of unemployment with the dot-com boom in the late 90s, and then it shot back up when? This gray bar, which indicates recession in this model. And then unemployment fell back down below its natural rate, and then shot way up above its natural rate to double digits in the Great Recession. And then we have this nice long expansion that you and I have all enjoyed until the coronavirus. And whoosh, look at that unemployment rate. We haven't experienced anything like that, and no, I'm not old enough to remember anything like that. So that is the real deal, but now you could model the real deal on a napkin, which I'm sure that's exactly what you've